Day and welcome to the 21st Annual Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference, also called NWILL. And you'll hear that term a lot, NWILL. Today's date is September 8th, 2022, and depending on your time zone, it could be morning or a good afternoon or possibly even a good evening. For the third year in a row, we are gathering together in the virtual realm and using our third conference platform. Every year we get a little better at this, but we also learn something new each year. Please bear with us today as we learn the new and different functions of Whova. On that note, as always, I like to let everyone know who's leading this show. So my name is Mary Monick. I'm the Assistant Manager of Resource Sharing Services at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And my OCLC symbol is TJC. I have over 13 years of interlibrary loan experience spread over 3 institutions, including the years I have been on the committee. I have attended and or presented at NWILL for slightly more than half of those years. I am the 3-time chairperson of this conference, and I started in this role in 2019 when I lived in Greater Seattle and have led this conference through the pandemic. However, this is my last year as the chairperson, and I'm sure my director is currently grinning ear to ear right now, hearing me say that publicly. My reward for leading NWILL through the pandemic and transitioning it from a regional conference to a multinational conference is that I was awarded the OCLC Rooster Stars Virginia Bowsher Distinguished ILL Librarian Award at ALA Annual this June. This award has brought NWILL full circle, as the very first Rooster Stars Award in the year 2000, given for mentorship, was awarded to our founder, Joanne Hallgren. The following year, 2001, was the first year of the conference.
This is being recorded.
Oh. Oops. And yes, that is a picture of me eating a s'more out camping pre-pandemic, because it is one of my favorite pictures. And as I always like to say, in interlibrary loan, we only take ourselves serious when we have to. So that's me. On that note, this year's conference would not be where it is without the following people. Please note that they are from all over the USA and Canada. They represent mostly academic libraries, but there are a few medical and health sciences and law libraries as well. We started with 2 public libraries represented, but then 1 person defected and joined the academic ranks. The names in purple are a special subcommittee this year who has been working on investigating and establishing NWILL as a certified nonprofit in the state of Oregon. This is no small project, and I commend these people for working on this project for us. This is an early reminder that NWILL is a 100% volunteer-run conference each year. Those who plan this conference attend it, enjoy it, and then choose to take on the extra work to bring this conference to you. When you listen to the sessions over the next 2 weeks, these are all sessions sent to us during the call for proposals. If you see something lacking in our scheduling, if you want to see more for public or medical or law libraries, please submit the session proposal when we make the call in early 2023. On that note, why are we here? Why do we attend any conference? Well, first, we're here to learn from each other. Most people think conference learning happens during the presentations, but please explore the conference interface, especially under the community tab. People are talking and asking questions, sharing articles, and tricks of the trade. Speaking of sharing articles, we are here to share with each other. Maybe it's to share how we document something. Maybe it's to make a reciprocal borrowing agreement and save your department a little bit of money. ILL people love to share, so much so that my department changed its name during the pandemic to Resource Sharing Services. Next, we're here to talk to each other. But wait, how do we talk to each other in a virtual conference setup with webinars? Well, we have virtual meetups available, roundtables today and next Wednesday, and old school discussion boards. And because I'm also noticing a Q&A that has entered into the webinar section here in Zoom, please feel free to use the, assuming it's there, the Q&A and chat section in Whova itself. Even though we are happy to look and monitor questions and chat in both areas. Finally, we are here to celebrate. NWILL sold out of our nearly 500 tickets for this year's conference. We are one of the most badass departments in the library. For some of us, it's the only thing we do. For others, it's part of the pile of duties we have. For example, in my last job, I was the ILL manager, cataloger, serials manager, circulation manager, and student supervisor. So I get it. Interlibrary loan is often the Cinderella department of the library. People ask us to make do and change this or that. NWILL is Cinderella at the ball, where what we do gets to shine. On that note, let's shine a light on who's here this year. We have 45 of the 50 United States, plus the District of Columbia. We also have most of the large provinces of Canada and representatives from the Lumi Nation and the Lower Tanadane, which I probably just said horribly, both of which are tribal or First Nations in the Pacific Northwest. Outside of North America, we have people attending from India, Jamaica, China, and Portugal. Our attendee from Portugal is also our first presenter from outside North America. To help attendees understand who is here at a glance, I've taken the voluntary information provided at registration and created some visuals. Please note that 1/5 of attendees did not provide information. First, let's look at where everyone works. This year, the majority of attendees are from academic libraries. This is not unusual for NWILL. However, over 13% of attendees work in public libraries. In this case, that is over 60 people. Again, we often receive feedback at the end of the conference that not enough of our sessions appeal to public library staff. If you want to see more sessions that appeal to you, whether it's public libraries, law, medical, special libraries, NWILL is happy to review your proposals. We're always excited to see them. Now, what about experience? Nearly 40% of attendees have 10 or more years of experience in ILL. But also notice that 26% of attendees have started in this field in the last 3 years. That means since the fall of 2019. They barely have experience with this profession was like before the pandemic. There are several meetup groups planned in the community section for new ILL practitioners. And while I expect a lot of new people to attend those sessions, I recommend some of us old school people should drop in and answer some questions. Or for that matter, maybe we can learn something. Finally, I want to look at our registration demographics. We have the diversity makeup of NWILL here on this slide. Note that out of 358 responses, again, we have nearly 500 people in attendance. There were 425 selections. This means many people are more than one of these. And while ILL is predominantly white, like many libraries, we are, in like the profession, we are a department often staffed by technicians with few library positions available for those of us who take that leap. Please remember when talking with someone that no matter their job title or years of experience, that we are here to learn, share, talk, and celebrate with each other. And now for a little bit more of the serious, a time to talk about the NWILL Code of Conduct. I will be reading the short version of our Code of Conduct aloud. However, please visit our webpage at the link. I'm going to put it in this chat, but if I could find someone to put it elsewhere to read the full version. It's much more detailed as well. So NWILL is committed to providing a safe experience free of harassment or abuse for everyone. Harassment will not be tolerated in any way. Sexual language and imagery is not appropriate for any conference venue, whether it be in person or virtual, including talks, workshop, parties, and other online media. Conference participants violating these rules may be sanctioned or expelled from the conference without a refund at the discretion of the conference organizers. And all conference organizers do have organizer next to their name in the attendees section. So if you need to find an organizer, they're easy to find. I just realized I put that link just to those of us here and not to everyone. And now it doesn't want to behave.
Melissa also added it in the chat in Whova.
Oh, thank you very much. On that note, we would also additionally, NWILL would like to read its full land acknowledgement during our opening session. A shorter version is here on the slide, and I will pass it off to Carl Seward, who is one of our many people who has moved locations, and I can't remember the name of his their new location.
Thank you. In past years, our in-person conferences have been held at the Sylvania campus of Portland Community College. We wish to acknowledge that this beautiful location is the land of the Atfalati people, also called the Tualatin, as well as the Kathlamet, Clackamas, bands of the Chinook, Kalapuya, and Malala. The tribal populations lived here for at least 14,000 years before European colonization. In 1855, a group of nations called the Confederation of the Grand Ronde was forcibly removed from their lands to the east and brought here through deadly forced winter marches. A reservation was established that included what is now the Sylvania campus. In 1954, the rights of more than 60 Native nations in Oregon were summarily terminated by the United States government. We acknowledge that this land was stolen through both illegal settlement and through treaties negotiated in bad faith and signed under the threat of genocide. Most of those attending this conference live in North America. The place where each of you is standing has a similar story of occupation, theft, and treachery. We wish to acknowledge that the indigenous peoples of these lands have experienced traumatic history, but also that they remain among us. Native Americans and First Nations people are a vital part of both this continent's present and its future. We encourage you to learn about the indigenous peoples to whom the land you occupy rightfully belongs. Please join me in a moment of silence in honor of the Atfalati and all other indigenous people. As a first step, I invite you all to visit native-land.ca. I will post that in the chat in both places, and find your local area and the peoples to whom it belongs, and then to add a personal land acknowledgement to your profile here in the conference platform and to any other place where you use social media or communication forms. We are all responsible for understanding the history of colonization and genocide of indigenous people, and must commit to learning, building relationships, sharing stories, and taking action to support Indigenous sovereignty, priorities, and actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. I would also like to acknowledge that since land acknowledgements should not be performative, NWILL will be making donations to the Center for Native American Youth and the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. Winners of our games and door prizes this year will also have the option to donate to these organizations. And our keynote, Bobbi Newman, who you will be hearing from later, has also donated their honorarium to these causes this year. And if you would like to know more about those organizations, they are linked on our homepage, but you can also on our Whova homepage. But I also have links for them. If they are not up live now, I will post them as soon as Bobbi starts talking as well. On that note, we have scholarships this year, and in the age of virtual conferences, scholarships are a little different since we have no need to provide funds for traveling. NWILL has opted to provide 4 winners with free registration, a professional development book, a copy of our keynotes book this year, Fostering Wellness in the Workplace, which was just published a week ago. Applause to Bobbi. And donated swag from our sponsors. This year's scholarships were sponsored by our founder, Joanne Holgren. Scholarships were awarded based on ILL experience or lack of experience, need, and diversity. In addition to the pictured scholarships, Amigos, another one of our sponsors, donated 5 scholarships to ILL practitioners from from Amigos libraries. And forgive me if I start talking fast because we're running a little long in our intro here. So time for a little lighter. And we are going into the how do we get around this conference? So I always, because we are in a digital setting, note that any examples I give are from the website and not the app. First, most of what you need is on the left-hand side of the web page. The home icon takes you to our front page. This is where our code of conduct and land acknowledgements are. Also, the link to the post-conference survey is here. I take the back, not post-conference, post-session survey is here. So if you forget to do it at the end of a session, it's easy to find. Next is the agenda section. If you found today's opening remarks, you probably figured out the agenda section. But here is a few tips. You can find an agenda, you can build an agenda in Whova, and you can export the sessions to your personal calendar. This includes Outlook, Google, and Apple. You can also change the event time to local time on any page. And this is what it looks like in Whova. This way, you know when things start locally for you. Note that the event time is Pacific time. So if you live in Pacific time, that time is not going to change. Attendees is a cool section to check out. If you've been in this field for a while, you can search to see if any of your old friends are in attendance. If you're newer, you can search by location or maybe a specific institution you want to make friends with. Send them a message in the conference and maybe schedule a meetup. You can also make notes about someone for a follow-up later. One of the more exciting sections and very busy parts, and I mean it was hopping this morning, even before we started talking, has been the community section. This is where we can find the discussion boards, schedule a virtual meetup, or maybe even an in-person one, if there's a lot of people attending NWILL in your area. Share articles, post job openings, or other conferences. Also, this is where you can find announcements from the conference committee and where you can pose a question to the organizers. And since it has already popped up once this morning, note that when you share an article, it is a URL, and please make sure it is not behind your institutional login, because it will break it. Moving on to win a prize. Who doesn't like to win a prize? Under here, you can learn about all the games going on, and NWILL loves games and giving away prizes. Prizes for us range from gift cards for bookshop.org and bluebills.com, which is my favorite love right now. I've been learning to crochet, to donating funds to national parks and animal foundations. Winners will be drawn at the end of the conference and then emailed afterwards to select their prize. But please note that the photo and caption contests don't have any cat photos yet, but we do have a dog, fish tank, and lots of plants. Somebody please rectify that. I don't have a cat and I want one so bad. Two of our games directly support our sponsors, for whom we couldn't keep the price of NWILL down without their assistance. The first game is our passport game. To play this, you click on the winner prize and then passport. You will need to visit 4 of our 8 sponsors and do 3 things. Make a comment in their chat and maybe do something more than say hi. Like their page and click door prize entry. The other game is just for participating in the round tables that take place after the vendor presentations today and next Wednesday. Each session is 30 minutes long, and you just need to visit 3 of the tables.
This meeting is being recorded.
We need to ask for a code, but it does require you to be there for 2 minutes at each table before moving on. There are also hangout tables if all the spaces with the vendors are full. These tables will just let you talk with other attendees. So yes, I guess you could call it a little bit of forced socialization. If discussion is going well, schedule a meeting or make a meetup in the community room after the roundtable session closes. And finally, thank you to our sponsors this year. We have many returning friends, but have 2 new ones. First is the Amigos Library Services, most well known for being in the South, Mid-South, Southwest. And the other is in the National Library of Medicine network of the National Library of Medicine. That is always a mouthful. Also called the NNLM. The NNLM will be in our roundtables both days, but will not be presenting a live presentation. But please feel free to stop by and speak with them, as the network is a great source for library staff who serve any students studying medicine. I will also point out that our wonderful Keynote today is a part of this system, but our roundtable is being staffed by the Pacific Northwest representative, and Bobbi is the Midwest. I think she will correct me later about that, I'm sure. Also, later today will be presentations from OCLC and Atlas Systems, and for our newer ILL practitioners, these sponsors are responsible for WorldShare ILL, Tapasa, and Iliad, respectively, 2 of the major ILL management systems. Next week, we'll have presentations from Rapid ILL, Rapido, and Research Solutions, aka Reprints Desk, and another round of roundtables. On that note, considering I've talked a little long, but also some technical issues, I'd like to say welcome to our keynote, Bobbi Newman. I'm going to stop my screen share, and Bobbi should be able to share.
Great, thank you so much, Miriam. Get my slides going here. Really appreciate the warm welcome and all the scholarships and the land acknowledgement. So yes, you're correct. I am in Region 6, which serves the Midwest region, and I'm at the University of Iowa here in Iowa. So I'll go ahead and get started with my presentation. I do start my presentations with a permission slip. I think this is really important. We are still in the midst of a global pandemic and collective trauma, so I encourage you to prioritize your wellness during this session. Um, you please feel free to doodle, color, knit, move your body in a way that feels good to you, eat a snack, take a drink, take a break, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. Your wellness is more important than anything, including this presentation today. A little bit about me and who I am. I have been with the network of the National Library of Medicine for almost 6 years now. I'm the Community Engagement and Outreach Specialist at Region 6, but most of our work is online, so everything we do is a little bit national these days. I am at the University of Iowa, and I am here in Iowa City, although colleagues in my region are around our area, and we actually have one who works out in Oregon. So you may run into her sometimes. I'm also a mindfulness student, and I'll talk a little bit about my journey with that. And I'm a healthy at every size advocate, although the language around that is changing. I feel like that's still the best way to express that approach to wellness. When I talk about wellness and self-care and mindfulness, I like to talk a little bit about how I got to where I am. And the first thing I did as part of my work at the network of the National Library of Medicine was attend a lot of national and state conferences, especially the first couple years that I was here. And as I was going around the country, I was hearing a lot from library workers about burnout, about compassion fatigue, about resilience, and a lot of those topics. Um, it was kind of alarming. And of course, this is pre-pandemic, so it's even worse now. But one of the things I realized is a lot of these topics talked about how people as individuals could recover from work situations, but didn't really address how we improve our working conditions or our workplace in order to have a healthier workplace and not have these issues or to combat these issues. One of the great things about the network of the National Library of Medicine is that all of the classes and webinars that we offer are free, and I ended up creating a class on that. I'll talk about that in a second. My personal journey also involved a mindfulness-based stress reduction class at the University of Iowa. And this was a program that lasted several months and involved attending weekly sessions as well as a day-long silent retreat at the end. I went into mindfulness very skeptical. I was not into that kind of thing when I started this journey, but my experience has really taught me over the last couple of years that when I do this work, it works. And I'll talk about mindfulness as individuals at the end of the presentation. As I mentioned, the Wellness in the Library Workplace class is available, and there'll be a link to that later at the end. It is a free 2-week course that from the National Library of Medicine, and I believe we just scheduled the next session of that in November. So if that's something you're interested in. And my work continued as we went into the COVID pandemic. I brought together a number of amazing speakers. This was the first panel I did, but I have done a lot over the last couple of years, and to talk about self-care and wellness and prioritizing ourselves during this time. I also hosted a free national symposium for library staff focused on their health. So it was 3 days with a wide variety of guest speakers, and we had about 6,000 people register and over 3,000 attend live. It was very clear how cathartic this was for people and how people felt seen for their own needs for the first time. And as Mary mentioned, my book is now out. So after all that, I have written a book. This is probably my last book. I had initially thought of a follow-up, but there are some amazing people out there doing that work, and I'm going to highlight them at the end, and hopefully they'll write a book. So what are we talking about as we talk about health and wellness? And so just a reminder, guys, I can't see the Whova chat while we're doing this presentation, but I am perfectly happy to answer questions either at the end, or I think I can see Q&A if I pop that window out. So feel free to jump in with anything, but I can't see your responses in Whova, unfortunately. I also want to highlight, okay, so when we talk about health, I had to sort of think like, what are we going to talk about when we talk about health? And there's so much information out there about health and wellness in the workplace that I had to sort of draw a box around different aspects of health. And I found this definition from the World Health Organization particularly helpful, and in particular because it addresses our physical, mental, and social well-being. And it's not just the absence of disease or infirmity or illness, but it's a really a holistic approach to our health and wellness. And I feel like that's just really important. The other thing I had to do was to decide what I was going to talk about in the class or what I felt like was important and what research said was important and what I wouldn't. So first I want to talk about what you should be considering as part of your approach to health and wellness at work. The physical aspects are probably the first thing that come to mind when you think about a healthy workplace, specifically the health of individual people. Um, the things we're going to talk about include things like ergonomics, access to natural air, light, air quality, noise, etc., the layout of our office spaces. We're also going to talk about emotional and mental aspects of health at work, including stress and compassion fatigue, burnout, invisible labor, and emotional labor. It's really interesting because when I was doing this readings and research around this, um, people often use emotional and mental health interchangeably, and attempts to find a clear definition of both yields a significant overlap between the two. Oftentimes, emotional health is seen as an aspect of mental health, but just so you know, that kind of grouping them together for this. And this was the part I thought that ended up being sort of really important, especially as I dug further into the research, is the things that should not be a part of your health and wellness at work. And the first one is weight loss, diet, and exercise. When I started looking into wellness workplaces, and even still now in my workplace and other places I visit, weight loss or walking programs are some of the first things that come to mind when we think about wellness at work. Um, I can go down a whole road about why addressing individuals, addressing those type of issues on an individual basis versus a community and culture and structural problem are is not helpful. But let's talk about like specifically why they're harmful. Um, Focusing on diet and exercise can trigger eating disorders or lead to eating disorders or disordered eating in people in your workplace. Weight isn't the best indicator of mental or physical health. You cannot tell if someone's healthy by looking at them or what they eat. Um, Focusing on weight loss or movement programs can create divisions among staff, reducing camaraderie, increasing judgment. It can lead to bullying. Staff can isolate or be isolated or choose to self-isolate because of the perceptions around diet and weight loss. Most diets just don't work long term, and so any perceived benefits from losing weight are negated when that weight is regained. The BMI system, I really encourage you to look into the history of this. This is a system that the healthcare profession uses and we in the United States use. It is deeply flawed. It is sexist and racist. It was built to understand the average height to weight ratio for men, particularly white European men in France and Scotland were used for the data. Later attempts to validate the index as a measure for health only used men again, and they did use some men from South Africa, but threw out that data because it didn't align with the rest of the data. So BMI really perpetuates fat phobia, including in our healthcare profession. So it also in our doctors and in the systems. There's a lot of research about overweight patients receiving lower quality care. I also would say that there are legal and ethical issues around workplace weight programs that focus on either weight or step counts. Um, you don't know if somebody has the ability to walk or to walk the steps that they think you should be walking for the program. So really just encourage you to steer clear of them. This is a place where I don't have any flexibility. Um, the other thing I think these are less hard and fast for me, but just not particularly helpful. So the things in the faux health and wellness are things that might not cost money, but they have no proven health benefits and might actually harm you. So one health example might be as we go into the fall season, you'll see headlines about ways to prevent the cold or flu. Things like drinking tea and wine can help prevent the flu. I have an article that links to this. in the class. But basically, when you click through to the article scientific study, what you find is that the research showed that eating more plants can help with flu resilience. It's green leafy vegetables are a much better option, and tea and wine are kind of a reach, but that doesn't really make for a clickable or shareable headline, right? Um, so these kind of things, the other kind of things that fall into this are the idea of battling cancer and that people who maybe pass away from diseases aren't fighting hard enough. It's meant to be positive and supportive and create a feeling of community and create a sense of doing something when people might feel helpless. But it can sort of have a really negative connotation when somebody passes away from some of those illnesses. Um, and we often apply this attitude to other types of illness, including mental illness and substance misuse. We just have this idea that people who have a mental illness, including depression and anxiety, just need to go for a walk or get outside, get out of bed. So the last category is wellness as a commodity, and the wellness industry is almost a $50 billion industry. That's billion with the B. Um, It is huge. So some of the things that fall into this category include things like fitness trackers and apps. These things can be helpful and useful, but they aren't necessarily required to be healthy or to have a healthy workplace. So there's plenty you can do for health and wellness that doesn't involve devices or apps to track any type of fitness or wellness. In particular, it's concerning the privacy aspects of those apps and that data. These aren't protected under HIPAA. Um, so, kind of think about that. There's also been an increased interest in apps and mindfulness, and these are excellent tools to help you practice mindfulness, but these obviously are obviously being used to make a profit, that kind of thing, and there are plenty of ways to practice mindfulness without those tools. Again, if you choose to use them, that's great. That's a choice. It's just not something I recommend incorporating as part of a workplace plan. So why are we talking about the benefits of the healthy workplace and why should you care other than like, hey, we want to be healthy, right? Um, it increases job satisfaction, which helps to reduce turnover, improves the mental health and wellness of employees. It also there's a lot of research that improves physical health and well-being. Employees who feel healthier mentally and physically and have increased job satisfaction obviously have increased performance and they take fewer sick days. There's also less presenteeism, which is when people are in the office or in the library or at work, but aren't necessarily being productive or performing. So, this can happen when people come to work sick because for a variety of reasons I'll talk about later, but they're not actually being productive. It also helps to give the library a positive reputation in the community when staff is happier and healthier. That gives the library a reputation as a good place to work, and it helps improve the customer satisfaction. When you feel good, physically, mentally, when you're happy with your job, you're going to have a better experience interacting with patrons or customers. So first I want to talk about what the aspects of the physical environment. And again, what I'm highlighting here is what research says are best practices. And so I really want to emphasize the permission slip I gave earlier because having worked in public libraries, that's my background before I came to this position, I've worked in a lot of places that had less than ideal situations. And it can be a little stressful or triggering to hear how much different the best situation is maybe from what you're working in. So ergonomics, I think, is probably one of the things that first comes to mind and you might be most familiar with. This is often focused on the correct position of our keyboard and mouse and computer monitor. It's really important that you evaluate your workstation for ergonomics. And if your library system doesn't offer that, here at the University of Iowa, we have a department that will come in and do that for you. I still remember the first time they came in to evaluate my workstation, how much they had me lower the desk because we do have adjustable height desks, thank goodness. And again, this is a situation where you might not have that option, but most desks are too high for a pretty significant portion of the population. You should actually have a much lower desk than you do. If possible, adjustable height desks are best. This is one to allow people to sit and stand as they choose. Particularly for shared desks, this can help ensure that the desks are at the correct height for each person who uses that space. I know there's been a lot of focus, I think, over the last couple of years in using adjustable height desks for sitting and standing. And one of the things I found interesting is that you're really there when you start reading the research, there is just as many dangers for standing all day as there are sitting all day. They're just different. They're just different dangers. So really, what they recommend is if you're able to do this, is that you go about half and half. So what the professionals here told me was to start standing about 5 minutes a day, an hour, and then you want to work up to about 30-30, so that you're standing half the time and uh, sitting the other half of the time. It's also really important to take breaks away from your computer, move away from your desk, get out of that space. In particular, I know you guys are on Interlibrary alone. I remember when I was the cataloger, I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. Make sure that you're looking away from your screen at least once an hour to give your eyes a break. You should be looking something further away from you, a distance away from you, and that's why moving away from your desk is really important. Um, The next aspect is air and health. And this is interesting because I started doing this reading and developing this class long before COVID, and air quality has become significantly more important over the years. But let's talk about temperature first. This is really interesting to read the research about this. I know keeping the office at a happy temperature for all employees is a struggle. Personally, I've worn fingerless gloves at work, kept a cardigan at work, snuck a space heater in under my desk. But there is a growing amount of research that cold air at work can do more than just make us cold and uncomfortable. It affects our ability to concentrate, increases errors, and reduces productivity. According to one study, increasing the office temperature reduced errors by 44% and increased output by 150%. And lower temperatures in offices reduces productivity and motivation in general. There is some research that being physically warm leads to social warmth. So setting the workplace temperature a little warmer can increase your camaraderie between staff, the feeling of teams, improve morale and collaboration. This also can affect the impact of our interactions with patrons. So feeling emotionally warm toward others can make a huge difference in how we interpret our interactions with patrons and approach difficult situations. I also want to stress it's really important to remember that workspaces can be too warm. As somebody who runs a little hot myself, I also have been in this situation where I can only take off so many layers of clothes before it gets awkward. And some people prefer to be in a cooler workspace. It's also important to acknowledge that hormonal changes or medications can cause hot and cold flashes in individuals, and so being able to control the temperature of our working environment is essential. One of the many benefits of having a workspace that includes an office is, or even a cubicle, is being able to use a fan or a heater as necessary, especially if individual thermostats aren't an option. And most heaters have, you can buy a heater now that has a safety feature, that kind of thing. So there just isn't really a good argument for not allowing them at this point. Let's talk a little bit about scents. The smell in the office actually can have a real impact on productivity, distractions, that kind of thing, mood in the office. Some workplaces are eliminating heavily scented lotions and other types of fragrances. I really hate saying cologne and perfume. I wish there was a neutral thing for fragrance, so I'm just going to go with fragrance. Also be aware of cultural perceptions regarding what qualifies as smelly food. I know of offices where people popcorn was a no-no, right? Because it has a strong odor, especially if you accidentally burn it in the microwave. But also that there are a lot of foods that are perceived to be especially smelly, that aren't traditional, American type foods. So this is one of the reasons it's really important to encourage people to take their breaks and take their lunch breaks and not eat at their desks. And the last thing is air quality. Air quality is a little tricky, I think, and I just, again, I speak from experience having worked in a very old library that, the windows don't open, so you're never getting fresh air. The heating system and the cooling system is old. In fact, you had to make a choice in the spring and the fall when you were going to turn one off and turn the other one on because you couldn't have them both. But there's a lot of research about the effects of air quality and how important air filters are. Obviously, systems are bringing in pollutants from the outside, particularly if there's poor filtration or the filters aren't being changed frequently enough. There's also a long list of items from inside the building, including things like mold or dampness, especially in older buildings. Building and paint products, including carpets, and those type of things can release chemicals and smells into the building. There also can be pests inside the building, like bugs, cockroaches. These can make chronic health issues such as allergies worse, and they can often trigger asthma attacks even in those without allergies. Um, and just experiencing irritation of the eyes, nose, throat, and lungs, and skin. This obviously can really release. Lead to increased sick days or just a general lack of productivity due to not feeling well. So some of that presenteeism I talked about earlier. So the exposure to nature is really important, or to natural light. I'm sorry, exposure to natural light is really important. And again, I've been there. I worked in a basement in a library that was never really intended to be space for staff. I worked in a building that we bought that was nearby. That was turned into offices where most of us didn't have a window to the outside. I worked in a brand new, lovely, beautiful library that did not have a window in my office because architecturally that wasn't a good place for a window, which is just sort of unbelievable. So there's lots of reasons we don't get natural light at work. But it's really important that we get some exposure to natural light during the day. Many of the devices we use during work can cause eye strain, and taking breaks away from the computer screen frequently is really important. Overhead light can cause glare, especially fluorescent light can cause glare on computers. It increases eye strain. Many library employees and patrons are sensitive to fluorescent light for a variety of reasons, but older buildings and workspaces often still have them. There's a lot of up and coming research about the lighting types we experience during the day and how it affects our health and productivity at work. Exposure to natural light during the workday improves overall well-being. It helps reduce eye strain, it reduces headaches and drowsiness, so you feel more awake when you're exposed to natural light. But it also improves our mental and physical health and helps increase productivity. One research report found a 70% increase improvement in work performance in an office or workspace that included natural light. So if natural light is better, then exposure to nature is even better, right? Or is even better. Studies show that exposure to nature can directly impact workers' physical and mental health. It helps decrease your diastolic blood pressure, which is the bottom number on that reading. It also helps speed recovery from illnesses. It can reduce the impact of the stress you experience at work from interactions with patrons or even internal interactions. It helps increase our attention capacity and improve psychological well-being. So this exposure to nature also includes plant life. It just improves our general physical and mental well-being. And this is particularly important, why it's important to take your breaks, move away from your desk, get outside if possible, or go to a window where you can see outside. Noise at work can be problematic. The world around us is just getting louder in general, and that does include the workplace. Many libraries have open office plans or use cubicles. Both of these expose us to background noises, just ranging from the sound of others typing to being forced to overhear conversations you're not interested in. Lack of adequate workspace or appropriate workspace often results in wearing headphones at work to drown out distracting noise. And the research shows that noise exposure is disruptive and stressful. A noisy work environment makes us up to 66% less productive at work. And people who work in open plan offices take 60 to 70% more sick days. An Oxford economics study found that distractions caused by cubicles negatively impact employee satisfaction and productivity. So there's obviously the best situation is everyone has an office with a window with natural light, which probably isn't going to happen, but there are definitely ways that you can start working towards this, including cubicles with high enough walls to keep noise out, sufficiently enclosed work areas, quiet work areas, or designated quiet times, making sure that there's private spaces to make phone calls and have meetings, etc. And aesthetics at work. This is something we don't think about, but we probably as part of wellness, but we're certainly aware of. Libraries in particular tend to give priority spaces to patrons. So they give the spaces with the natural light and the best furniture and the best views to patrons while putting the library staff in the back. The building, often in areas without exposure to windows or natural light, but also then putting things like the outdated and stained and dirty furniture in the break room after it's been removed, after it's not good enough for the patrons. It can be retired to the staff area. It also can include things like carpet and paint that maybe haven't been updated or outdated color schemes. There's been some research that shows that the visual design of a workplace impacts employees' moods, morale, and productivity. It includes a wide variety of things. So I already mentioned the paint, carpet, other materials, but also things like plant and water features, the use of natural materials in the furniture, the artwork on the walls, ceiling height, the ability and opportunity to go outside and interact with nature. So this is part of our holistic approach to a healthy workplace. So that's the physical environment. Now I want to talk about the rest of the environment, or the mental and the emotional policies, practices, and culture that we have at work. Vacation and sick or salaries and living wage. One of the most essential things a healthy workplace does is pay staff a living wage for the area. It's one of the social determinants of health mentioned in Healthy People 2020. And a living wage really means workers don't have to choose between filling a prescription or putting gas in their car, etc. It's really important to note that a living wage is not the poverty level. It definitely does not align with that. In addition to providing a living wage, a healthy workplace pays equal salary to men and women for the same work. Unfortunately, the last time we had data on this, which is in 2018, women still earned about 85% of what men do. That's true when comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, that is, managers to managers, or the same position. The last time that the research was done on this in libraries, it was exactly the same. The last time it was done was in from Library Journal in 2017. Men earn more than women in all states and positions. The salary, so that's true in libraries and out of libraries. But I want to also really emphasize that the salary gap is more significant for women who are Black, Asian, Latinx, or Native American. It's much more significant. So the benefits of a living wage and equal pay are right here. Decreasing blood pressure, it reduces suicide rates, reduces depression, reduces the number of sick days that are taken. It affects actually things related to pregnancy and childbirth, and just basically increases the odds that the children and dependents of your staff will complete high school. Vacation and sick time. This one I think might be the hardest one sometimes for libraries to hear, and I really dug into the research on this. It just goes against, I think, the culture in the United States, not just in libraries, but having a separate pool of sick time and vacation time and a culture where employees are expected to use both is essential to staff health and productivity. Offering a combined pool of PTO just encourages staff to come to work sick. PTO pools are just too small, or often too small, to allow staff to take adequate vacation time and stay home when they're ill. Staff who come to work while they're sick, and we saw this so much during COVID, and that we need to encourage people to stay home. Staff who come to work sick underperform while they're there, and this is that presenteeism we're talking about, and they spread their illness to patrons and other library staff. All staff should be able to take a minimum of 4 weeks of vacation a year, and because of the research around that, really demonstrates that vacations increase overall productivity, reduce theft, and improve teamwork and customer service. And I've certainly worked at places where there was a combined pool of PTO and sick time, and then there were people who were very proud in December that they were forced to take some time off because they had maxed that out, and that is just not a healthy practice. It's just not healthy for the individual or for the library. I think in addition to having those pools, it's really important to have a culture where staff are expected to use it. Um, I know that um, sometimes when you're sick in libraries, particularly, somebody might have to work the desk or cover for you in another thing, but the library should be adequately staffed to address that. Um, it's that we really need to empower employees to stay home when sick. No martyrs. Everybody stays home when they're sick. It's the best for everyone involved. It's the right thing to do for yourselves and your library. Um, Especially to think when we're considering our staffing needs. It's completely normal for several people to be out at a time, especially during cold and flu season, and the library should be adequately staffed for that. So talk about work-life balance. I think we hear so much about this, and I know we're hearing about this quiet quitting trend now and the importance of work-life balance. When I really started digging into this, Gallup has a lot of research on this, and I was really digging into it, and they talk about work-life balance a lot. It's one of those things that nobody ever really defines, but you kind of know it when you see it, I guess. So it's often philosophical components and also policies and procedures. And it can include things like that we're going to cover now. One of the places I found a specific list of things that were involved in work-life balance was the Government Services Agency, or GSA. And they had a list. And so we're going to go through those. And I like this one because it's a government agency and because it was a very clear list. So the first thing is telecommuting or remote work. And this, I think, was especially controversial before we went into the COVID pandemic, hopefully is less so now. I know in libraries that obviously there are desks that need to be staffed and there are reasons to have to be there in person, but there's a lot of our work that we can do remotely. And this is either working at home or a location of their choice, maybe 1 or 2 days a week or even partial days can help improve um, employee job satisfaction, performance, and reduce turnover. There's a lot of benefit from it. We saw a lot of that during the COVID pandemic, that people were working well. One study found that employees who telecommute are at lower risk for alcohol misuse, physical inactivity, and tobacco use. So you're getting back that time you would spend commuting. Often for many of us, that's an hour a day. Maybe some time you would spend getting ready in the morning, packing and making lunch, that kind of thing. And you're able to use that time to benefit your own health. I know that lack of productivity is a common concern when implementing telecommuting policies, and I just want to remind people that there might be one or two bad apples. There's a lot of research that shows people who work from home are actually more productive. Um, there's some research that indicates people who telecommute take fewer sick days and take shorter breaks. There's also been some research that showed a lot of people actually overwork while telecommuting, and that was something I know I found myself doing, is not taking, there's not those built-in breaks where somebody comes up to talk to you or wants to go somewhere to get coffee, or that kind of thing. Instead, the coffee pot's in the kitchen, which isn't that far from my desk, and I tend to uh, maybe work longer or work through lunch and that kind of thing where I didn't before. So which is not good. Not encouraging that. You don't want to encourage staff to do that. I will say, to remember, if you're having an issue with performance while someone is doing remote work, that's an individual performance issue and not a policy issue. It's not an issue with your policy, that you need to address that on an individual level, the same way you would if someone was underperforming in the office. I know it can be tricky when you have a service desk to staff, but working with staff to ensure that the desks are covered, it is possible. Really involving employees in the decision making and process can help a lot. And the other part of that is flex time. And flex time is allowing employees to flex their work schedule. It has similar benefits to telecommuting. So this may mean some people come in early and leave early, and some people come in late and stay late. It lets you schedule workers to set their work hours around the needs of the library and their personal lives. There's a lot of benefits to this. Not only does it help with have some impact on your community. So for example, it might help reduce the commute time for everyone in your community because there are fewer people on the road. Some people are more productive at different times of the day. So for example, I'm a person who likes to get up at 6, I get my coffee, and I would just hop on the computer and start working, and then take a break later to, to sort of get ready for the day. My supervisor, who's a wonderful person and very productive, she is a late riser. And so I have gotten the best of my work done between 6 and probably before the time she gets up, right? That's my productive day. I don't want meetings in the morning. So this also allows people to schedule time maybe when they're most productive. It lets staff take time away from work for appointments or life events with the ability to make up those afters before or after work. Um, Employees who are allowed to flex their schedules when needed are more productive. They take less sick time. They tend to work more hours overall. They're happier at work, which helps reduce turnover and improve productivity. There's a lot of benefits with physical and mental health for having control over the schedules. And it's really important with all of these policies. I want to stress that these should be applied to all staff, not just staff who have children in their care. That everybody needs to have these abilities. Let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a really important part of wellness in the workplace, and we really need to I know a lot of libraries are talking about this, but we need to address this as part of our wellness program and acknowledge that a lot of this, the things that are happening, whether it's outright harassment of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or whether it's microaggressions, have an impact on their mental and physical health and affect their productivity at work. So I'm trying to stress the bottom dollar for the library because sometimes that's needed when making the case for higher ups. Personally, I think wellness should be its own pursuit in and of itself. But these things can reduce trust in the library, in the team. It reduces team building and camaraderie among staff, which affects performance and customer interactions. It reduces job satisfactions among those individuals and obviously is going to lead to turnover when they're feeling that way at work. So really internalizing those practices, and I'll have a little bit more recommendations on that. So let's look at emotional labor and the cultural, mental, and practices around that. So emotional labor, this is the practice of displaying certain emotions while hiding or suppressing others. Like many people who work in a service industry, we are going to be required to do those. That you can't interact with patrons who are difficult and express the emotions maybe that are on your face. But you're also sometimes required to do this when interacting with your fellow staff members or other people on the campus or where you work. But it's important to acknowledge that we do this and the effects it have on us. So performing emotional labor can decrease job satisfaction. It also increases emotional exhaustion and contributes to burnout. Also want to recognize that Black, Indigenous, and people of color also have to perform emotional labor while interacting with patrons, but they may also have to do it on a greater level with their fellow staff members. Libraries really can and should be places where these staff members don't need to perform emotional labor while interacting with their coworkers and colleagues. And genuinely embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion is a step in the right direction for reducing that emotional labor. Again, there's not much we can do to eliminate that emotional labor interaction with patrons, but there are ways to help mitigate the harmful effects. So a healthy workplace acknowledges that emotional labor happens, that it can be exhausting, and they do things like ensuring that the workload of emotional labor is equally distributed. So dividing up desk time and making sure people have breaks away from that is a good example. It also gives people time and space to process the aftermath of emotional labor. And that's one of the reasons that having private workspace is really important, so that you are not just sort of on a stage all the time when you're trying to process through things that may have happened to you. And I just realized that there is a typo on this slide. This is not emotional labor, this is invisible labor. Visible labor is the small interactions that tend to make the workplace more like socially cohesive. So, for example, these are things like birthday cards, condolences cards, flowers for services. It can be things like birthday parties, bringing in cake and that kind of thing. But it's also things like mentoring younger staff. Or newer staff. It's things like serving on committees and other collaborative efforts. This is mostly performed by women. this invisible labor is mostly performed by women at home and at work, so much so that when men do it, it's often seen as heroic. Um, you're probably not going to stop having invisible labor at work. These small interactions that make the workplace more socially cohesive are important, but it also is important to so how we deal with that is one, acknowledging that it happens, and then two, making it part of the official process. So maybe there's a committee where people rotate in and off that help plan these birthday and that kind of thing. That can go and be included in their performance review. It's definitely recommended that if you're performing this labor at work, that you share it with your manager and include it in your annual review, especially if you're helping coworkers with projects and that kind of thing. You can see a lot about burnout at work, especially in the last couple of years. There's sort of 6 things that's really been boiled down to. This includes excessive workloads, so working over your capacity, etc. It's really important that workplaces, while they might have occasional rush projects or tight deadlines, it shouldn't always be like that. Being short-staffed should not be the norm. You might need to adjust hours, services offered, or otherwise scale back to maintain excellent service without burning out staff. Lack of control or autonomy over your work can result in unsatisfaction or burnout. It's important that people feel satisfied and competent at work and while doing our jobs and in control of our tasks. If people aren't given an appropriate level of responsibility, they may start to feel out of control and not happy. So don't micromanage staff. Think about how you can empower staff to make decisions and take responsibility for their work. Insufficient reward. This isn't, or just rewards that don't match the effort. This isn't just about monetary, although again, salaries should be competitive and benefits should be excellent based on what we previously discussed. But it also can provide things that makes the day-to-day flow of work satisfying. So social rewards, recognition from people around you, and intrinsic rewards, feeling that you're doing a good job. Supportive community or team. This is things like good teamwork and low levels of conflict, or conflict is addressed early. Positive social interactions. It's important to feel that you're part of a community while at work. So sharing praise, comfort, happiness, and humor with others. Think about what you can do to increase positive interactions, but also, again, address conflict early on. A lack of fair and equitable treatment. This can lead to sort of feelings of feeling disrespected or powerless in your work. This can include things like inequity or workload or pay, but it also, if people feel that the handlings of promotions or evaluations were handling inappropriately, or if the library has poor dispute resolution practices. Try to use standardized tools and scales to ensure the sense of fairness in workplace. Again, address conflicts early and head on. And then conflict of values and of personal and organizational values. I think this one is a lot more complicated, but this would be where someone ends up working for something they don't really believe in. And I'm not sure we run into this quite as much as in libraries as maybe in some other professions. One of the examples that in one of the articles was someone who has a strong belief in the humane treatment of animals working in a meat processing plant, right? That's a pretty extreme conflict in values. Excuse me. Another thing to think about is compassion fatigue. Like many who work in helping professions, library workers are at risk for compassion fatigue. It's this, when we're helping people or animals in distress, it's just you reach this state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering that can really have an effect on your physical and emotional well-being. Again, you're probably not going to prevent this from happening, but being aware that it happens and having these other policies and practices and physical environment in place to address that can be very helpful. So just as a reminder, sort of like these unhealthy practices and policies really run into these sort of problems at work. So really quickly, like what can the library do? And I really want to start with what can the library do? And I think I have 20 minutes left, not quite, with what the library can do, because a lot of these you can, as individuals, address the symptoms, but you can't create the cure. So really want to stress that as librarians, I know this can be disheartening to see all this list of things that are there that are good, but work with what you have and continue to aim for the best. So if you're not going to get a new building anytime soon, you're obviously not going to have substantial changes to your workspace, but you might be able to move things around. You might be able to add in things, those kind of things. So these are some things that we've talked about that are helpful. When I teach this class and I ask people what they're going to take away or what changes they're going to make, people often respond that they're going to put plants in their personal and shared space. I'm thinking about just taking this out as an option because it's just it's so ubiquitous, and I think that sometimes people just sort of end there. Um, there's a lot of discussion about what plants do well without access to natural light that happens in the chat. Um, Look at getting adjustable height desks, stand sit desks for staff. That can be a good place. Having a private space, so where people can take phone calls or just go to process their emotions. If they've had a difficult time on the desk, those kind of things is really important. Investigate ways to improve air quality in the library and in the workspace, and then really encourage lunches and breaks away from desks. This really helps with a lot of these other things to create a culture where people are expected to do those things. Talked about this before, but allowing fans and space heaters can really help with a variety of things, including fluctuation in body temperature for a variety of reasons. Um, Eating your lunch away from your desk can help reduce some of the issues around odors and scents in the work. If possible, create an inviting outdoor area and encourage employees to use it, um, and have it be private for staff. If you have cubicles or an open workspace, make sure that you have a private room or space for where people can take meetings and have phone calls that aren't sharing personal information out over the shared space. Go ahead and empower staff to make adjustments that they need. I really am a strong believer in conversation and communication and empowering staff to make those adjustments. Some people may need or want different adjustments than others, and having that ability is really important. One of the things I also recommend is if you have a shared workspace or cubicle space to come together and agree on designated quiet times. So, probably maybe not the first thing, the first half of the day on Monday when people might be chatting about the weekend or those kind of things, but have a designated quiet times for focus and for working. Where's my slide? There we go. Consider how you can allow telecommuting and flex time. Having clear communication among staff, empowering them to share what that would look like for them or how they might address problems that might arise while they're doing those jobs. Setting clear expectations around performance and work and start times, those kind of things. Problem solve together. And do remember that performance problems are about individual performance and situation and not about the policies that are in place. One of the things you can do to help with diversity, equity, and inclusion is practice cultural humility. There's a lot of resources and tools out there on this. There are YouTube videos that you can watch. There are things that you can read. Really integrate this into your practices and your policies in the library. Integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion into everything you do. Understand that certain people have different access to health and wellness resources in their community. They have different perceptions of the healthcare system, historic different interactions with those systems. There are differences in their daily lived experience. When employees tell you there's an issue or a problem, listen to them, believe them. As an organization, you need to set meaningful and comprehensive goals. You should include DEI and probably accessibility as part of management performance evaluations so that it is sort of baked into your culture. Do not place the burden on employees of color for your DEI work or evaluating your DEI work. And then test, learn, and repeat. Remember, this impacts your performance as an organization. Creating healthy policies and a culture that respects employees' health and well-being. Prioritize staff well-being when you're talking about work. Empower staff to make the choices that benefit them. Really, sick employees are expected to stay home. And we've talked about a lot of this overall, so I won't get into that. Some additional recommendations. I've got about 10 minutes left, and so I want to really briefly touch on what you can do. I want to stress that my slides and all of my references have been uploaded to the space, and you can take a look at them, or feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. Caring for yourself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. And this, I want to really acknowledge the roots of self-care as we see them today. Um, these were written by Audre Lorde, who was a queer Black woman. And she wrote this in this book after she was diagnosed with cancer for the second time. She dedicated most of her life to civil rights activism. Self-care has become a billion-dollar industry with all sorts of things that you can buy, but it really, self-care doesn't cost anything, and it's not a luxury. It is necessary for our survival, especially given the current state of the world. There are a lot of ways that you can practice self-care, and I really like to stress this, that it doesn't have to involve purchasing anything. It can be very simple, foundational things like drinking enough fluids during the day. I think curating social media feed is a really important part of this to understand what you are seeing during the day can have a real effect on you. But also just learning something new or spending some time with people who care about you are acts of self-care. Your physical environment at work, get an ergonomic assessment, even if you have to ask a coworker to do it. I talked about designating quiet times. Consider wearing headphones with some soothing background noises while you're working. Do be conscious of the fragrances that you're bringing into the workplace. Add decorative items to your space that you find relaxing or soothing or helpful. Consider getting a plant, even a fake one. Your practices at work, do use your vacation and sick time. Please don't save them up. Stay home when you're sick. Take your lunch breaks away from your desk. Get up, get out of the way. I know this is difficult because often the break rooms are not attractive places. Find a place to have lunch. Maybe that is better. Please know your limitations and don't be a perfectionist. Don't take your work home with you. Modify your workspace as needed. I'm not gonna go into the 8 dimensions of health because I do want a little bit of time for questions, but these are really important, and I think is particularly because it's part of a holistic approach to health. And so just be aware that all of these things on the screen are making up what makes you a healthy person as an individual. I want to recommend mindfulness. Again, I talked about this at the beginning, and I went into this practice really with a much I don't know, kind of as a skeptic. And it does work if you remember to do it, which now that is my struggle, is remembering to do it. But it can have a real impact on your life, on your physical and mental well-being. There's a lot of ways to practice mindfulness. You can do it mindful breathing, mindful movement, eating, gardening, crafting. So it isn't just, this sometimes idea of people sitting for an hour meditating, which is something that happens, but it can be a 5-minute mindfulness breathing exercise or body scan. It can even be a 2-minute practice. It could just be being mindful while you're gardening or taking a walk or moving your body. Some resources that are available to you. MedLane Plus is from the National Library of Medicine. This is an excellent resource both for you and for patrons that you serve. I know most of you probably aren't interacting directly with patrons. I also personally love the National Center for Complementary Integrative Health. It really delves into things that a lot of us, I think, are exploring now, including acupuncture, acupressure, herbs at a glance, but just alternative medicine. And you can kind of see right here where you can dig into that research. Herbs at a glance is really helpful to know if you're considering taking herbs that might interact with any prescription medications. Your place of employment probably has an employee assistance program. I would encourage you to find out about that and to use it. It is confidential if you're self-referred, and so there's a variety of services, including referrals to other programs that might be helpful for you. The Allied Professional Association of ALA has a toolkit for advocating for better salaries. So if that part of this presentation really resonated with you, there are resources out there. This is from the World Health Organization, and it's a really great booklet. It's free, it's online, to take a look at what's happening in your workplace and do some assessments. If you're looking for people to follow who are talking about wellness in libraries, I can't recommend Katrina Davis Kendrick enough. She's on Instagram, Twitter, and I believe there's a Facebook group and has a website. I also recommend Mindful in LIS from Amanda Lefwich and Ingrid Ruffin. So again, also having a blog, an Instagram, and a Twitter account, so you can kind of find what best serves you. Also includes a lot of resources on their blog. There is a Mindfulness for Librarians Facebook group. I am a member of this. I'm not affiliated with it in any way, but it is a good resource. There is the Wellness in the Workplace class that goes more deeply into any aspect of the things I have touched on today. It is free. Our next session is in November, and you can register for that starting now. As mentioned several times, I wrote a book, so you can take a look at that if you want. And we've come up very close. I'm not even sure if we have time for questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I also want to emphasize too that all my references are in the PDF. So if you have any questions there, you can follow up.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Bobbi, for joining us today.